Elves, Magic's mighty mana rampers and Santa's preferred slave labor force. They are expert marksmen and finely attuned to nature. They're basically dirty hippies in space. You've probably heard of them from the very popular anime Lord of the Rings. Elf lore runs deep. It's as old as magic itself. But see, I know you already knew that. You're a man of culture, a man of taste. And you're not here for the lore. You're here for the sweet, sweet elf action. So today we're going to take a traditionally mono green deck and we're going to jund it out. We're going to add a hint of red mana for some spice, a little bit of black mana for that extra bit of emo, and we're going to roll it all together into one absolutely disastrous Elfball.
What are you doing with your life?
Welcome to the Commander Dojo, Sensei Lex here. Because I love you guys so fucking much, I have not one, but two Tana and Miara decks to show you today. The first is a budget big stompy Elfball list, and the second is an all-out optimized combo deck. They play very differently, but both are extremely fun. The goal of the budget aggro deck is very simple. We're gonna ram elves into people's faces. Cards like Beastmaster Ascension and Triumph of the Hordes are our finishers. There's also enough druids in the deck to support Gilt-Leaf Archdruid being a viable piece. He's definitely obnoxious as hell and probably isn't right for every playgroup, but I mean, come on, how often do you get to steal people's lands? Splashing black and red gives us access to really solid recursion pieces like Living Death and Underworld Breach. One issue with hyper-aggressive decks is that they fold really easily to board wipes. Don't let Toxic Deluge get you down. Just reset your board and keep the Elfball running. We also have a wide variety of sack outlets at our disposal that give us the ability to interact with our opponent's boards in unique ways. Goblin Bombardment is a classic sack outlet. Load an elf into the cannon and fling it at any target. It's also a convenient instant speed way to trigger Miara. Pyre of Heroes is like a baby tribal support version of Birthing Pod. If you end up getting bogged down with small pathetic elves in the late game, this is a great way of turning them into bigger, better threats. And Plunge into Darkness serves two purposes. It's a great way to respond to board wipes because you're gonna lose the creatures anyway, so you might as well gain a bunch of life. It also allows you to use your life as a resource, so you can dig deep into your library and hopefully find exactly the card you need to get right back into the game. The combo version of this deck, however, is a totally different beast. There are two primary ways of making infinite mana. The first is by using any elf that can make 5 or more mana with a single tap, then pumping all of that mana into Staff of Domination. With 5 mana at our disposal, we can use 3 of it to untap our mana dork, 1 of it to untap Staff of Domination, and float the other one. Once you've floated an amount of mana equal to Elon Musk's net worth in your mana pool, you can then start using Staff of Domination to draw out your entire library. Our second way of producing infinite mana is with an elf called Argothian Elder and 2 particular lands, Gaia's Cradle and Wirewood Lodge. Assuming there's at least one other elf on the battlefield with Argothian Elder, this combination will generate infinite green mana. Tap Gaia's Cradle to produce 2 green mana, then use Argothian Elder to untap up to 2 lands. Use 1 of the green mana floating in your pool to activate Wirewood Lodge, untapping Argothian Elder. Then tap down Argothian Elder again to untap Gaia's Cradle and Wirewood Lodge. Infinite green mana pairs really nicely with Azuri Renegade Leader or Allosaurus Shepherd. Turn that tiny little board of mana dorks into a gigantic board full of creatures with trample. I've found that having the tutor power of black and the wheel ability of red makes for a very solid addition to the mono-green combo-centric shell. And as always, these deck lists are in the description below, so go on over and check those out, and follow me on Moxfield while you're over there.
It's time to
Play Magic the Gathering online against a bunch of random people.
Round 1. Fight!
Gerard Golgari Lichlord gets out of the gates quickly, spewing 2 rat colonies onto the battlefield. Kalia of the Vast isn't far behind, ramping out with the Signet on turn 2, then hitting the battlefield herself on turn 3. Lathril's going to get her own Elfball started, getting a quest for renewal and an Imperious Perfect into play early. My first 2 turns are all about ramping early with an Arbor Elf and a Farseek. By turn 3, I'll have enough mana in play to get both Miara and an Imperious Perfect into play. Gerard's going to bring 2 more rats into play, then get aggressive and slap me around for 5. Kalia's going to protect their board and get both a Grand Abolisher and a Swiftfoot Boots into play. Once Kalia's suited up with her new pair of boots, she's going to swing over my way and cheat out a Lord of the Void. Lord of the Void is going to steal away my Elvish champion and put it onto the battlefield under Kalia's control. Lathril's going to get a Prowess of the Fair into play, then activate Imperious Perfect to make an Elf token, which will put a quest counter on Quest for Renewal. I'm just going to try to stave off some of the aggro coming my way by putting down an Elvish Dreadlord. Gerard's going to power out a Greater Good, giving themselves a solid sack outlet and a card draw engine. Kalia, who is apparently not a fan of enchantments, is going to main phase a Return to Dust, exiling the Greater Good and the Quest for Renewal. Then Lord of the Void is going to take a bite out of Lathril for 7 and steal away a Miara from the cards they exile. Lathril's going to main phase a Binding of the Old Gods, then use its first activation to send Lord of the Void straight to the Shadow Realm. Before I start my turn, I'm going to use Imperious Perfect to make an Elf token, and then during my main phase, I'll play out Tana. Gerard's going to cast the Super Tribal Artifact Door of Destinies, then follow that up with yet another Rat Colony. Kalia is going to top deck a Vandal Blast, then immediately use it to blow up Door of Destinies. And then just purely to send a message, they'll swing Kalia over into Lathril for 2. Lathril's second Binding of the Old Gods trigger will ramp them into another forest, then they'll follow that up with another Elf Lord, Canopy Tactician. I've got a board wipe and a wheel in hand, but I don't want to use them yet. I'm going to sit here patiently and see how things play out. Gerard's finally going to enter the battlefield, and he'll be followed up closely by another rat colony. Kalia, facing down a sea of rats and elves, isn't going to make an aggressive move towards anybody and is instead just going to pass the turn. Lathril's final Binding of the Old Gods trigger will give her elven army death touch until the end of the turn, then she herself will enter the battlefield. Then a 4/4 Forest Walking Elf is going to head over Gerard's way for 4 damage. In their second main phase, Lathril will play out a Numa Jiraga Chieftain and a Wirewood Symbiote. Before I start up my turn, I'll activate Imperious Perfect once again to grow my elven army. But before I can really get going during my main phase, Kalia's just had enough of our elf and rat bullshit and is gonna scoop out of the game.
What the fuck?
It's time to shatter this stupid stalemate. I'm going to swing out with all of my creatures, aiming most of them at my fellow Elfball player. They'll utilize Wirewood Symbiote so they can activate their Imperious Perfect one more time before combat and give themselves a free chump blocker. Regardless, I'll still take a nice bite out of both of my opponents. With one of my brave elves dying heroically on the battlefield, I'll be able to utilize Miara's ability to draw myself a card. I end up getting a Stoneforge Masterwork, which I'll put into play before I board wipe. I'm going to deploy Blasphemous Act as a tactical nuke to sweep the board. The resulting death triggers are going to give Lathril 4 elf tokens and myself 4 new cards drawn thanks to Miara. Gerard's going to re-enter the battlefield from the command zone and be an 8/8 thanks to the sheer number of rats that are in his graveyard. Lathril's going to deploy a Timberwatch elf, then swing into me for 4, chipping me down to 16 life. I'm gonna get this freshly drawn Elvish Archdruid into play and then just hang tight with my Rakdos Charm in hand. Gerard's going to get aggressive and smash into Lathril for 8 commander damage and then finish off their turn with another rat colony. Lathril's gonna get a Marwyn the Nurturer into play, then use a pumped up 1/1 elf token thanks to Timberwatch elf to slap Gerard for 10 damage. I'm just trying to hold steady here and not piss anybody off too much. I'm going to redeploy Tana and just chill. Gerard's going to continue to be aggressive with Lathril, only this time they'll be met with a chump blocker. In their second main phase, they'll use a Life's Legacy to sacrifice Gerard, drawing themselves into 8 new cards. Then they'll break out a Grim Tutor and slam down another rat colony. Lathril's going to re-enter the battlefield and then just pass things over to me. I'm gonna channel my freshly drawn Dark Ritual into a Wheel of Misfortune. I'm going to end up wagering 5 life on this wheel, however, my bid is only in the middle, seeing as Gerard's going to wager nothing, and Lathril will wager 6 life. First things first, I'll deploy an Elvish Harbinger, then I'll suit up Tana with Stoneforge Masterwork, so that way when she connects with one of my opponents, I'll make even more Saprolings. Then I'll use Eldritch Evolution to sacrifice away the Elvish Harbinger, putting a Tendershoot Dryad directly into play. Tendershoot Dryad is super synergistic with Tana because it's going to make every Sapperling token we create off of her combat damage trigger a 3/3 instead of just a 1/1. I now have a Sapperling army in a can at my disposal, but that could all be undone depending on what Gerard Grim tutored for. Looks like they tutored for the Ice Age powerhouse Thrumming Stone, and with a foot-bottom feast at their disposal, they're going to be able to put every single rat colony that was previously killed right back on top of their library, and as soon as they cast just one rat colony, they're going to set off a chain of events that's going to put all of those rats right back into play. Lathril facing down death by a million rats is just going to start throwing elves onto the battlefield. Immaculate Magistrate, Izuri, Renegade Leader, and finally Elvish Archdruid will all come into play. At the end of Lathril's turn, I'll use Reclaim to get back Rakdos Charm. Then when I start up my turn, I can use Rakdos Charm to take Gerard all the way down to 1 life and straight up take Lathril out of the game.
Bye, have a great time!
Then I can use Toxic Deluge where X equals 1 to sweep all the rats off the board, then send the elf army in for the win.
Excellent. Round 2. Fight!
I've got a pretty fire opening hand here. I'm going to start things off by deploying a Llanowar Elves. Zara is going to spend their turn 1 playing a gamble. They'll end up discarding a Force of Will. They'll pass things over to Savala, who will have a very explosive turn 1 with a Chrome Ox, a Birds of Paradise, and a Mana Vault. Arixmethes is going to drop a turn 2 Soul Ring, then pass things over to me. For my second turn, I'll use Sylvan Tutor to put Priest of Titania on top of my library. Zara is going to fire off an explosive turn 2 with a Soul Ring into a Talisman of Creativity and finish off the Lightning Greaves. Sylvala is just going to put Occam Adversary into play, then pass things over to Arixmethes. Arixmethes' Slumbering Isle will enter the battlefield on turn 3. For my turn 3, I'm going to play the Priest of Titania that I tutored for earlier. Zara is going to play out a Glasses of Urza, then use them to take a peek at Arixmethes' hand, and once they've made sure the coast is clear, they'll put Zara into play. Zara will get suited up with Lightning Greaves, then swing into Arixmethes. Once Arixmethes' hand is revealed, Zara will decide to temporarily take an Eternal Witness, which when E-Witness enters the battlefield, it will return Gamble to Zara's hand. Sylvala will finally enter the battlefield on turn 3, then Occam Adversary will take a bite out of Zara, giving Sylvala a card draw. Arixmethes will play out a Storm Surge Kraken and a Rampant Growth, choosing to take a Slumber counter off of Arixmethes for each spell. I have all the pieces I need to set off the combo here, so I'm going to go for it. I'm going to get Staff of Domination into play, then play out the 5th elf total on the battlefield, Marwyn the Nurturer. With infinite green mana at my disposal and the ability to draw out my entire library thanks to Staff of Domination, Zara and Arixmethes are just going to scoop it up.
Bye, have a great time!
I'm going to begin the grindy process of drawing out my deck 1 card at a time. I won't stop until I hit Eldritch Evolution. I can use Eldritch Evolution to turn an elf into an Izuri Renegade Leader. With my infinite green mana, I can pump all of it into Izuri to make my board infinitely huge and have trample. And that's a GG.
Well done.
I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my opponents in both of today's games, and of course to you, the viewer. Thank you so much for tuning in. And you know what it is. Stay classy, stay safe, and I will see you next time.